For some, this could be any other college stadium on a Saturday afternoon. But they are the unfortunate ones who know nothing of the 12th man, silver taps, and Aggie mustard. They don't know that attending an A&M game is something very, very special. They don't know that here on the campus of Texas A&M is an entire world in itself. A world of pride, spirit, and tradition, of great stars and legendary coaches, lifelong fans, and of course, the core. Together over the years, they have made Aggie football an unforgettable experience. And without them, the game would surely lose some of its luster.
1, 2, 3.
This is the story of one of the truly special and unique teams in college football. A&M fans, get ready for the electrifying history of the Texas Aggies.
Arkansas has been passing A&M dizzy. They're going to the air again, and it's intercepted. Dick Todd of the Aggies has it at the 10. He's got a block.
Aggies down 13-7. Cotton Price back to pass. He's got Herbie Smith at the 10. Smith laterals to John Kimbrough. Tulane defenders closing in. Looks like they have him hemmed in. No, he breaks free at the 5. He could score. Touchdown!
Osborne takes the snap. He flips it back to John David Crow. He sweeps right, picking up a block. John David Crow, touchdown!
Hargett dropping back again. He won't stop. He's going deep, deep. He's got Bob Long on the right sideline. He's at the 25, the 20. Long is going all the way. A&M takes the lead over the Longhorn.
Mike Mosley on the option. He fakes inside. He's going to keep. No, he pitches back to Curtis Dickey. Curtis Dickey's got a hole. He's looking for room. He's down to the 10, the 5. He busts through 3 Iowa State players.
Side, now the wing. That's Woodside will go in motion to the right. The handoff or pitch goes to Tony. Tony at the 10, Tony at the 5. Tony's going to go in for a touchdown.
To understand the spirit and tradition of Aggie football, you don't begin here among the present-day splendor of A&M's nationally ranked teams. For the sights and sounds of this age were shaped by the dreams of another. Listen closely and you can still hear the echoes of the past. You began here before the turn of the century when Texas A&M consisted only of a few buildings. Founded in October of 1876, few could imagine that the Agricultural and Mechanical College of Texas would grow into the mighty university that it is today. The area around A&M had served as the assembly point for cattle drives to Dodge City. Now it would be the home to the first public institution of higher education in Texas. In 1894, A&M fielded its first football team. The first game was with a high school team from Galveston, and the Aggies prevailed 14-6. That same year, the Aggies played Texas for the first time, unfortunately losing 38-0. But the early Aggies were tough. One of the players, Josh Stearns, by his own admission, received 7 letters, 5 in athletics, 1 in having too much fun, and 1 from President Ross telling him to scat. Stearns, one of A&M's most loyal former students, did return, however, and graduated in 1903. In 1897, the team got its first paid coach, C.W. Taylor, if you can call him that. To pay his salary, a hat was passed around at the games. But even in those formative years, football took an extraordinary importance at A&M. At one point, the faculty became so incensed at the game's distractions that it tried to pass a rule preventing the A&M team from playing other Texas colleges. But they failed. And then came the clincher, the one event that created perhaps the fiercest rivalry in college football. In 1902, Texas A&M defeated the Texas Longhorns 11-0 in a historic upset. The team soon had its own stadium, which was simply some agricultural land bounded by a barbed wire fence. It became known as Kyle Field. By 1909, A&M had 750 students, and it seemed every one of them hated to lose. When A&M lost its first game that year, the students took up a collection to pay off Coach N.A. Merriam's salary so that a new coach could be brought in. His name was Charlie Moran. And he was a hard-nosed, controversial coach. He forced his players to undergo draining practices. He recruited tough Indian students from Oklahoma to play for him, and he won. With such stars as 190-pound halfback Joe Ute and Caesar Dutch Hahn, A&M became a feared opponent. In his 6 seasons at A&M, Moran won 38 games, lost 8, and tied 4, the best winning percentage ever achieved there. He was so overwhelming that UT students created a cheer that began to hell with Charlie Moran and all his dirty crew. Moran's tenure with the faculty and administration was stormy. He quit in 1914, but the students loved him. On the day he left, the Corps honored him with a full dress parade. TU had stopped playing A&M during Moran's reign. The Longhorns said the games weren't gentlemanly. But in 1915, the rivalry resumed. And for the first time, the University of Texas came to Kyle Field. They were easily the favorites, but on this day, they met for the first time the mystique of Aggie land. Even though the Longhorns gained 301 yards on the ground, only 95 by the Cadets, they still lost to A&M 13-0. Here in the old black and white days of college football was a game that never left the memories of those who saw it. Joyful students even sneaked into Austin the next year and branded the 13-0 score on UT's mascot. The 1915 upset inspired a winning tradition that would prevail through 12 of the next 13 meetings of the two rivals at Kyle Field. But in those early years, an even more important tradition sprung forth, one that would leave a permanent mark on the A&M campus, the 12th man. In 1917, a young coach named D.X. Bible came to A&M and immediately fashioned among a team comprised mostly of sophomores an unbeaten Southwest Conference championship season. No one even scored on them in 1917. The next year, virtually the entire team went into military service for World War I, including Coach Bible, who became a pursuit pilot. But they were all back in 1919, and the dynasty continued. No one scored on them that year either, and Bible had 2 great runners who got whatever kind of yardage they wanted. Jack Mahan, known as Mr. Inside because of his power, and R.G. Higginbotham, known as Mr. Outside. The unbeaten, unscored-on streak continued until the last game of 1920, when Texas pulled off an upset of its own, 7-3. Bible's team returned with a vengeance the next year and played so well with 5 wins against 1 loss and 2 ties, they were invited to play in the postseason Dixie Classic in Dallas. The opponent was Center College of Kentucky, ironically coached by former Aggie mentor Charlie Moran. Center had only given up 6 points to its last 10 opponents, but behind such offensive threats as Sam Houston Sanders and Puny Wilson, A&M won easily. The final score was 22-14, but the real story happened on the bench.
Mr. Bible, he was getting a number of people injured, and he remembered that he had a player who had been on the football team up till basketball season started at A&M, or basketball practice probably, the name of King Gill.
Bible knew that Gill was working that day as a spotter in the press box.
So he sent and asked him to come down to the bench, and he put on a uniform of an injured player, but he never did get in the ball game. But from this day, he has been designated as 12th man.
Because E. King Gill came down to the field and suited up, ready to play if needed, another vital tradition had begun. Soon, students began standing through entire games in case they were ever needed like King Gill. Meanwhile, throughout the 1920s, D.X. Bible kept providing one exciting season after another. Another conference championship came in 1925, then another in 1927. That year, A&M produced one of its finest triple-threat offensive backs ever, a small 145-pounder named Joel Hunt. He almost single-handedly led A&M to win over conference favorite SMU by scoring 3 touchdowns, passing for another, and intercepting 4 passes himself. His total of 128 points in a single season is still a conference record. But the most dominating figure through the 1920s was Bible himself, winning 5 conference titles in 11 seasons.
He demanded everything to be done just exactly right. And if you didn't do it right, you did it over until you got it right. He got upset with me. I missed a play, I missed a block in a scrimmage. And he asked me a question about the assignment on the thing and what a couple of the other fellas did, which I didn't know. And Coach Bible grabbed me by the seat of the pants and by my shoulder pads and marched me off the field. And as one of the fellows said, well, Field said, what'd you say to him? I said, yes, sir.
Matty Bell had the difficult task of replacing DX Bible. He came in 1929 and stayed 5 years without producing a winner. But football's importance kept growing at A&M. Students had begun building bonfires in preparation for the annual game against Texas. Yell practice had become another custom. In 1930, the school began pouring millions of dollars into capital improvements, and enrollment went from 3,000 to 5,000 students. The school was more than ready for a football winter. But in 1934, when new coach Homer Norton arrived, he found very little money for scholarships and even fewer talented players. He knew what it was going to take to produce another great football team champion.
He had some old lights put up on the edge of the stadium out on a practice field, and we may be there until 2 hours after night, after it's dark. You really got to work it over, I'll tell you that.
And it was exactly from those practices that such stars emerged as Dick Todd, number 25. Although he did not have much of a supporting cast during his career from 1936 to 1938, Todd fashioned one of the most spectacular performances in A&M history. He led the Southwest Conference in rushing his junior and senior years.
He just had great strength and great everything. He just came along at a time when they just didn't have quite enough material to be proved his greatness.
Dick Todd was a different type of running back. Strong legs, good change of pace, and you could try to tackle him, but you were just making a run at it.
These were the great single wing days when teams used multiple formations and dozens of trick plays just to gain 5 yards. Todd was the master of this game, but it was his teammate Joe Rout who knew how to beat it. The great defensive guard, number 43, was virtually unstoppable. Rout became the first A&M player to be named an All-American, an honor he achieved in both 1936 and 1937. He was so competitive that he could not tolerate those who weren't.
The scare wasn't in him. I don't care if a man weighed 300 pounds. As far as Joe Rout was concerned, there was no man too big for him to tackle.
Joe Rout captured the Aggie spirit in a completely different and a much more moving way. He will be a shining memory not only because he tackled the impossible odds on the field. That courage he developed in football served him during World War II. Rout was a captain of the infantry when he was killed in 1944.
Well, they claim that he was pinned down in the beachhead over there in France, and all of a sudden he got tired of that and jumped up, and the Germans literally opened a machine gun fire on him and split him half in two. And that sounds about like him. I mean, he's hot-headed. And he said, my God, I've had enough of this. I'm going after him. And just by the time he jumped up when he was going after him, they opened up and that was it.
You're talking about somebody that was dedicated. I don't care what he did. He gave everything he had. He wasn't that big for a guard, but as I said a while ago, he gave 100%, and he gave it all in the war.
Homer Norton did finally build his championship team. In 1936, he got a bank to loan him $25,000 so he could provide scholarships to the top high school players he could find. He signed 23 blue chips, and by 1939, they were ready to go. They would make up the greatest dynasty Texas A&M has ever had. Names like Kimbrough, Robnett, Thomason became household words because they would lead the Aggies to their first national championship.
We played together, we worked hard, we played hard. I think we realized once or twice that we were reasonably good, but I don't believe we thought that we were that good.
Quarterback Cotton Price running right on the sweep, cuts inside, about to be tackled. Laterals to Kimbrough. Kimbrough carrying the ball like a loaf of bread. He's got one man to beat.
No one could tell how good the 1939 team was at first, but on the fourth game of the season, they destroyed national power Villanova and remained unbeaten.
They come down here and they rolled their arm sleeves up, and they were big coal miners, you name it, big, mean. It had been more or less a drought for the last month or so, and the dust on that field would rise about 6 or 8 inches, And if you got your face down in there, you'd smother in that dust and stuff. But that was the beginning of our championship, knowing that we had one hell of a good ball club.
Against Texas, the Aggies even pulled off the trick play of the year. With the score tied, quarterback Cotton Price brought the Aggies to the line. Wingback Bama Smith was hiding out near the sideline, fooling the UT defenders who thought he was out of the game. The sneaky pass play brought A&M down to the Texas 26-yard line. A few plays later, Price threw another touchdown pass to break the tie. The Aggies finished the season unbeaten and ranked #1 in the nation by the Associated Press.
You know, a majority of us never heard of polls, and all through this time, we never knew where we ranked. The majority of the players didn't. It wasn't even in their minds.
But they certainly knew where they stood after their 14-13 victory over Tulane in the Sugar Bowl. A&M's offense was led, of course, by John Kimbrough, who scored here on a 2-yard dive and later scored the Aggies' other touchdown to win the game. The 210-pound fullback and two-time All-American did things no other running back had been able to do before at A&M. Yet he rarely asked for the spotlight.
John didn't like the publicity, all the fanfare that went with it. He just never did. He loved being around the teammates. He loved to go on trips. He loved to play, and he loved to win. But he didn't like all that went on afterwards.
Still, Kimbrough's legend grew. He was practically a Paul Bunyan-like figure at A&M. The stories of his exploits never stopped.
John run with his legs high, and people that tackled him, his knees would knock him from one side to the other. In one game in Rice, one of their All-Americans, John hit him on his way to making a touchdown and must have knocked him 30 yards out there.
Kimbrough led the 1939 and 1940 teams at A&M to 19 straight victories and back-to-back conference championships. The only loss in those 2 years came in 1940 to Texas, 7-0. It was a bitter disappointment. But the Aggies won the Cotton Bowl at the end of the season with a 13-12 win over Fordham. And then they came right back in 1941 to win another Southwest Conference championship, the first team to win 3 consecutive titles. And much of it was due to the stern coach who allowed no profanity and demanded total obedience from his players. Homer Norton also was an innovator in the game, sending more passes than normal to the split ends, setting up new blocking alignments for his offensive line. He even was the first coach in the nation to bring in a mobile tower so he could watch practice from a better angle.
Every week, by golly, you worked and worked and worked. If you had those plays down, you might run a play 50 times. He'd be up in the sky rock up there watching you. And he'd work you till you had it down right.
And he was dedicated, and he was fortunate enough that made most of his players dedicated also. They were a very dedicated group, especially on the field. And if a player wasn't doing his job, they'd say, look, if you've got a little problem and you don't think you can handle it, we'll get somebody else off the bench. And that's all you had to say.
I don't guess I ever hear one bad word ever said about any one of the ball players. They will rag one another just like we did in college and just give one another hell, but very close. I guess they can't be any closer than probably brothers, really.
But good times didn't last forever. World War II took virtually every veteran player. Aggies love football, but they did their duty. The entire campus became oriented to the war effort. It was a memorable sight to watch students preparing to defend their country. It wasn't, however, the best environment for a football team. Norton's team in 1943 was so inexperienced that they were called the Beardless Wonders. Yet they posted a surprising 7-2-1 season and won a trip to the Orange Bowl. But the talent eventually dried up around A&M. After 2 bad seasons, Norton was asked by the administration following the 1947 season to leave. He regretfully resigned, and Aggie football went into a state of decline that lasted through the post-war years.
Rambling Robert does a hula step to shake off a pair of downfield tacklers. He's away for 53
There was
yards.
one major bright spot. In 1950, running back Bob Smith led an Aggie team to a 7-4 record, due mostly to his heroic running. Against SMU, he wore a huge mask to protect his broken nose. Called the Masked Marvel that day, he nevertheless ran for 297 yards, a conference rushing record that stood for 23 years. Still, despite the persistent efforts of coaches like Ray George, A&M could not put together a championship team. Then at the end of the 1953 season, a young coach from Kentucky was hired to see what he could do. His name was Paul Bear Bryant. He was known for his football savvy and for his toughness.
Coach Bryant got there and saw a lot of people kind of soft around the middle and decided he better get everyone in shape.
And so we have a pretty tough spring practice. And then we report for camp the next fall, and so they say, well, just get a change of clothes or two, a pillow, and we're fixing to go on a trip. Nobody knew where we were going.
Bryant took his players to a little town called Junction, and there for 9 days he worked them until they dropped. Even his toughest players, like the renowned Jack Pardee, came close to quitting.
Back in those days, we never took any water breaks. It was just so hot, and we worked so many hours that we'd come off the field dehydrated. Just the physical exertion of working that long, that hard in the heat, made it just about unbearable. Of course, it was unbearable. We had about 100 guys out of that group, or 90 guys out of the group leave that didn't want to have to work that hard.
Little seemed to come out of the Junction practices. The 1954 team won only 1 game, and people didn't expect much better for the seasons to come. Meanwhile, Bryant had recruited some of the best players in the country, emerging talents like John David Crow and Charlie Kruger. The Bear knew A&M's fortunes were about to change.
Around 11:30, 11:45, one of the coaches woke me up, and I looked up and he said, we're going to have a meeting downstairs. And all the players sort of assembled down in the lobby area of the dorm where we were living. And Coach Bryant told us the parable of the mustard seed and said, if you'll just hang in there. So I know it seems tough now, but if you'll just hang in there, I'll guarantee you before you all graduate, you'll win the championship. And gave us all a little capsule with a little mustard seed in it.
In 1955, Lloyd Taylor scored twice in 46 seconds to give A&M a remarkable victory. They went 7-2 that year, which only set the stage for 1956.
Here's a picture play for your memory book, one that tells you a football story in 20 seconds. Jack Pardee takes the second half kickoff at the goal and he rumbles toward home. The big guy just runs over people. But here comes the challenger, Joe Clements. There's a foot race and a bang, a collision. 85 yards on the return, and an unhappy, frustrated Pardee hits the ground on Texas 15.
It would become one of the memorable seasons in Texas A&M history. Historic because Bryant finally got his championship, and because a square-jaw kid from Little Spring Hill, Louisiana began to emerge. John David Crow married his high school sweetheart and came to A&M. Not sure what kind of football player he would make, but Coach Bryant knew how to motivate him.
I don't know whether I wanted to win or whether I had an awful big fear of losing, of what was going to happen if we lost. And I think that was part of his philosophy of getting us to play as hard as we could.
Somebody lit a fuse to John Crow, and the Louisiana Skyrocket does not flame out until he's gone 27 yards for a touchdown. And it's A&M 7, Texas nothing.
And Crow led the way. Against 1956 conference favorite TCU, it was Crow that caught the pass that led to the game-winning touchdown. It was his running that led to the Aggies' rout against SMU. But don't forget the help. Fullback Jack Pardee was named an All-American in 1956, along with his teammate tackle Charlie Kruger, who would be named All-American twice.
The experience we had, I think that what made it all the more the better was the group of us that were seniors together that had gone through a 1-9 year and all the adversity. To have the rewards of winning and being a top team and getting having people real proud of us and enjoying the work that we were doing.
The Aggies marched to an undefeated season and their first conference championship since 1941. In 1957, the Aggies picked up where they left off, winning their first 8 games. Only one of those teams was able to score more than a touchdown off of A&M. The season was topped off by the awarding of the Heisman Trophy to Crow. At the time, he didn't realize what it represented.
I walked in and there was a picture of an award on the side of the, and I asked him what it was. We were just visiting and so forth, and I asked him what it was, and he told me the Heisman Trophy. I don't know why that sticks out, but I can remember that I had no idea, and it didn't strike it didn't mean anything to me. And then when they called and told my mother in Spring Hill, when it was during the holidays after Thanksgiving, and told her that I'd received it, and I really didn't know how, I really didn't know it was such a big honor and so forth, and until they said that they would fly my mother and my dad and myself and Carolyn, my wife, and the president of the college and a coach to New York. And I said, boy, that's got to be a good award.
Bear Bryant announced that he would be leaving at the end of the season to go to the University of Alabama, and the Aggies dropped their last 2 games. It was not a triumphant ending, but even years later, the impact Bryant had on Aggie football would still be felt.
The only way to really describe him, I can describe him, he's a man's man. But, the influence that he had is the big influence, meaning that, what is life all about? Why are you at school? Why are you playing the game? And the same things that eventually we're trying to teach our own players. Coach Bryant always felt, and he did a great job, he could get you ready to play, but he could take an ordinary player and make him a good player to make him a great player, and a great player to make him a super player.
In 1963, women were admitted as students for the first time. The school's official name was formally changed from the Agricultural and Mechanical College of Texas to Texas A&M University. In 1967, compulsory enrollment of all new freshmen in the Corps of Cadets was abolished. The university's academic facilities continued their impressive expansion. But one thing didn't change: tradition. The Aggie bonfire roared each year, as did the midnight yell practice. The Fightin' Texas Aggie band played on, and every Aggie knew it was only a matter of time before a great football team returned. The next championship season came under the guidance of 29-year-old Gene Stallings. He returned as head coach for the 1965 season, just 9 years after he played his senior season at A&M under Coach Bryant. And Stallings quickly made it clear that things would be different. In the 1965 game against Texas, A&M was having trouble moving its offense, and so Stallings called for a play dubbed the Texas Special.
I had not intended on running it on the 9-yard line. I'd intend on running it around the 40, but we never got out that far. The play sort of turned the game around.
Ledbetter bounces the lateral to Jim Kaufman. Oh, shucks. Hey, what's going on down there? For one thing, Dude McLean is making tracks with that Texas Special 91 wild and weird touchdown yards, and watch that dude.
The Aggies still lost the game. They only won 3 in 1965 and then only 4 the next year. But anchored by junior quarterback Ed Hargett on offense and All-American linebacker Billy Hobbs on defense, the 1967 Aggies were predicted by some to win the conference. Disaster struck. They lost their first 4 games. The Aggies looked snake-bit for one more season. It was just before the Texas Tech game, however, that something changed in that 1967 team.
Well, it is a great story. It's one of the greatest stories, I guess, at Texas A&M's history. We were fixing to fly up and play Texas Tech. And as happens in South Texas, it was just a downpour, just a a monsoon rain was coming through Texas A&M at the time, and we were fixing to get ready to go play and leave for the airport. And all of a sudden, all the yelling started and the band started in the middle of this rain, and we looked outside, and I don't know how many thousands of students had lined up out in front of our athletic dorm there at Texas A&M to give us a yell rally right before we got on the plane to go up and play Texas Tech. That led us into probably the most exciting game that I've ever played in.
Still, it looked as if A&M might lose this game as well when Texas Tech scored to take the lead with only 53 seconds to play. But then it was time for Ed Hargett to take over. Hargett rewrote the A&M passing and total offense record book, and this is the reason why.
In this scene, Hargett and Long miraculously penetrate Tech's coverage to the 15, and time is called with 3 seconds to go.
As time ran out, Hargett rolled to his left to throw, but then headed for the red flag and scored to give the Aggies a 28-24 victory. A&M went undefeated through the rest of its season. In its final game, it beat Texas on the famous fourth quarter play when Hargett combined again with Bob Long for an 80-yard touchdown. At the end of his career, Hargett held 21 school offensive records.
Texas A&M a 10-7 win and the conference championship.
Of course, the Texas game of '67 is the highlight of my career because that was the game that gave us conference championship and sent us on to Dallas to play in the Cotton Bowl against Alabama. But you know, that was just kind of icing on the cake after we got to Dallas. The real thing was winning the conference that year and beating Texas there at home.
A&M was in the Cotton Bowl for the first time in 27 years, where it faced the University of Alabama, coached by Bear Bryant. When Wendell Housley shook off 7 would-be tacklers for a 20-yard touchdown, A&M had pulled off an upset win, 20-16. When the old teacher Bryant met his upstart pupil Gene Stallings, he made a rare display of emotion.
Well, you know, I was a little teary-eyed, I guess, because it was an emotional time, but it was his way of expressing, you know, you're the enemy, the game's over, but I'm proud to see you have a little success. The thing, when the game was over and the manager came running in there and said, Coach Bryant's coming in, Coach Bryant's coming in. And naturally, I think he's going to come in and visit with me, see, so I excused myself from the media. I said, I've got to visit with Coach Bryant. I walked on and said, Coach, you won't see me? He said, no. I said, I won't see you. I'm wondering, what's he coming over here for? He said, but I want to congratulate your players. He said, I want to sort of walk around and visit with them. And that's what he did. And that's the kind of person he is.
The success was sweet but short, for Stallings never had another winning season. Some great All-Americans played for him in the late 60s and early 70s, safety Tommy Maxwell, punter Steve O'Neill, and safety Dave Elmendorf. But at the end of 1971, Stallings left to be replaced by a former University of Texas assistant coach and the inventor of the wishbone offense, Emory Bellard. Emory Bellard came to A&M from Texas, where he had been an assistant, but Bellard had compiled a great record in his days as a Texas high school coach. And with his great contacts in the high school ranks, he proved that he was an excellent recruiter. A quick snapshot look of the 1972 freshman revealed that Bellard had pulled off the recruiting coup of the year.
Richard Osborne, Bubba Bean, Skip Walker, those were all guys that played on the offensive side of the football. And we had on the other side of the football, Pat Thomas, who was an All-American, Ed Simonini, an All-American, Garth Tenaple, an All-American, Jackie Williams, who was All-Southwest Conference.
You know, we were probably the cockiest group to ever come into A&M, you know, and they planned to be the best. So we weren't the typical type of athletes to come in, and we knew that we thought we'd be in national rankings and up for the national championship by the time we got to our junior year.
Thomas was very close to being right. Although they won only 3 games in 1972 and 5 games the next year, the Aggies began to really roll in 1974. They were number 2 in the nation in total defense, and although their offense occasionally sputtered, they got such spectacular performances from speedsters like Carl Roaches. But in 1974, on a cold, blustery day in Austin, the Aggies fell to Texas. The loss was a painful one, but it would serve as a springboard to the great season the Aggies would enjoy in 1975.
I know everything I did from that point was headed toward University of Texas that next year, 1975, there at College Station.
That junior year, when we got on that field and lost to them like that, and we went home, we said, you know, you really look at yourself and say, hey, we should have won that because we were better than they were. So we vowed the next year when we went and played them, everybody had that in their mind that, hey, this is our last chance. We're better than these guys. We're a better team. We have better talent. We're better football players, and we're going to beat them.
And it did look as if 75 would be the year. They were 9-0 when TU arrived at Kyle Field.
You know, the adrenaline was probably flowing as high as at any time I've felt it flowing in my body since I've been playing football. I mean, we were ready to play. We wanted to fight the guys on the other side when they were introducing us. You know, I can remember before the game up in my room, Melvin Robinson, defensive coordinator, and all the defensive guys were gathered, and we had the music on real loud, and Melvin was up there, and he was hitting people and throwing trash cans around, and, you know, we were real pumped up for that game.
Richard Osborne scored a touchdown on a cross-action pass. And the talented Bubba Bean broke loose for a 73-yard run that just missed becoming a touchdown by a step. It set up a field goal, however, and secured A&M's 20-10 victory. Emory Ballard had helped bring glory back to A&M.
He was a guy that could motivate you. He's more of a guy that really presses for perfection. He likes the guys to do it over and over until you get it right where it's going to benefit you down the road.
But the 75 team let a potential #1 ranking get away from them in the last game of the season when the team traveled to Little Rock and suffered a heartbreaking defeat to Arkansas. The team's emotional energy had been spent in the TU game, and they were unable to recover. The Aggies then went to Memphis for the Liberty Bowl, where they lost to Southern Cal. Nevertheless, Ballard had built a good foundation. Despite losing 24 lettermen, the Aggies in 1976 recorded a 10-2 season and a convincing Sun Bowl win over Florida. In 1977, often behind the talented barefoot of Tony Franklin, the Aggies went 8-3 and got a bid to the Bluebonnet Bowl. 1978 seemed to be shaping up in the same fashion with 4 straight wins, including its conference opener against Texas Tech. But after 2 consecutive losses, Ballard came under some criticisms. He decided he didn't need it, so he abruptly left. A lot of people were shocked at his departure. But through the years, Ballard has kept his warm feelings for the school and his former players.
The thing that I have always felt was happiness for the players. And I know people say, well, that's a bunch of bunk. But that's not a bunch of bunk either. Because I knew the things that those fellows had been through, and I knew the things that they'd had to do in order to get where they were.
A&M's offensive coordinator Tom Wilson was appointed to replace Ballard. Quickly, he became aware of the kind of pressure that an A&M coach can feel about guiding his team.
You know, when you go out there on the field, you know everybody's behind you, and you know they're pulling for you. And you probably got more, I don't know what you call it, burden to bear or whatever, but, you know, you're representing a lot more than I think a lot of these other schools are.
Wilson moved quickly to keep the A&M team rolling. The Aggies finished the season at 7-4 and went to the Hall of Fame Bowl, their 4th consecutive bowl visit. Behind the passing of Mike Mosley, who had emerged as one of the most talented athletes in the conference, the Aggies were invincible, beating Iowa State 28-12. The graceful tailback Curtis Dickey rushed for 276 yards in the game, a bowl record. But except for an exciting win over Texas, 1979 wasn't a great year, with the Aggies ending up at 6-5. 1980 was even worse, a disappointment for Wilson, as a very young team went 4-7.
Stick it right out, okay? Yes, sir. And I don't want to see any mistakes, and I want to see it in the end zone after this next drive. Okay? Yes, sir. Let's go.
But the outlook for 1981 was brighter. New signal caller Gary Kubiak put on phenomenal passing performances, setting a conference mark for 6 touchdown passes in one game against Rice. At the end of the season, the 1981 team had gone 7-5 with a win over Oklahoma State in the Independence Bowl. But the Wilson era ended and a new one began. To replace Wilson, A&M chose the 38-year-old coach from the University of Pittsburgh. Jackie Sherrill had led the Pittsburgh Panthers to a number 2 ranking in the country for both 1980 and 81, and he was considered one of the brightest young minds in college football.
There's no time to relax, but it's a challenge, and there's pressure, but I think that I do my best job under pressure.
With a remarkable tradition of excellence for such a young coach, Sherrill brought fresh enthusiasm to A&M.
I think the feeling around there was that we had the talent, but what was wrong? Why couldn't we win? So all of a sudden here comes a guy with a big name who's turned out a bunch of pro athletes, and it was very positive, and it got guys working really hard, and you see the result.
You want to still get him on halfback option?
Sherrill had little time to recruit, but he put together a top-notch coaching staff. They went into spring drills not sure what kind of team they had, but with the likes of veteran signal caller Kubiak and running back Johnny Hector, there was definite hope. Sherrill also made sure he became a part of the tradition and spirit of Texas A&M.
Thank you. I'll put you in loss for 30 minutes.
That's what they said. First, I want to swap hats with you. I want to give you a coaching hat for tonight now.
Well, I got news for you.
At a former players' reunion, he brought back such great figures as Bear Bryant, whom Sherrill played for when he was a student at the University of Alabama. Sherrill immersed himself in the Aggie way of life. He wanted to understand the vital link between the school and its football team. And through the 1982 season, he made a discovery that surprised him.
The thing that people didn't realize, and I didn't realize, that A&M has more pressure than any place in the country, more than Notre Dame, more than Southern Cal, more than any place. But it's a different type of pressure. There's no booing here. There's no throwing anything out of the stadium at you. There's no advertising in the stadium. There's no signs. And so consequently, the players, the pressure is a different type of pressure, and then the players consequently have a heavier burden to carry.
Indeed, the 1982 season was not good to Sherrill. The Aggies went 5-6, but he hadn't given up on his master plan. Still, the prospects for 1983 weren't much better. However, one of Sherrill's greatest innovations came with the introduction of the 12th-man kickoff team. Impressed with the determination and teamwork demonstrated by the young men he worked with during the construction of the 1982 bonfire, Sherrill came back to his staff with the idea of assembling a group of non-scholarship students to serve the Aggie football teams as the kick coverage squad.
And they said, Coach, now wait a minute. You fell off the bonfire. Something happened to you. I mean, you're really not thinking very clear. But we did it. The first sign up, where we had 252. We had 2 young ladies that even signed up to come out. But it's been a big part in turning our program around, because it really sent a message back to everybody that the 12th man is alive, and the 12th man is a big part of our program, and they have responsibilities to our program. They have a responsibility when they sit in the stands.
Also significant for Aggie fans was that Sherrill's first freshman recruiting class in 1983 began to make its mark on the football field. Midway through the season, freshman Kevin Murray took over as quarterback and led A&M to big victories over Houston, Rice, TCU, and Arkansas. By the end of the season, the entire starting backfield was made up of freshmen. The 5-5-1 1983 season only whetted the appetites for 1984, when 44 of 60 Lettermen returned.
Stump is throwing deep for Greg Dillon. They are bumping in the end zone. Caught, touchdown!
There's no such thing as learning to win the easy way. And in '82, when I came here, they felt it would be easy. They'd go out and win. I mean, just showing up, and that's not it. You have to learn how to win the hard way. And we didn't learn how to win the hard way until in '84.
The offensive line was beefed up by the arrival of transfer Doug Williams from the University of Kentucky. The 3-4 defense was anchored by consensus All-American defensive end Ray Childress. A lot of things seemed to be in place. And then in the third game of the season, Kevin Murray broke his ankle and was out for the year, to be replaced by Craig Stump.
I mean, there's so much pressure on Craig Stump to come in as a young man to perform and play, and it took us time, but we were inching up. We lost some games by a very narrow margin. One play here, one play there would have won the ball game. We go play SMU. We're ahead of them, going late into the fourth quarter by 21 points, and then we kind of faltered. And the next week we have a very bad week against Arkansas. But the players themselves, I'm talking about Ray Childress, Tommy Sanders, they made a decision, because they finally understood that it wasn't the people in the stands, it wasn't because Jackie Sherrill was here or that we were going to win. If we were going to win, they had to win. And I think that was the biggest turning point. And when we come back the next week and we played TCU at home.
This will be a 50-yard try. Here's the kick. It is up. It is long enough. The kick is going to be good for A&M. Eric Franklin, the brother of Tony Franklin, hits from 50 yards.
TCU was in position to go to the Cotton Bowl. All they had to do was beat us, and they're in the Cotton Bowl, and our players put a knot on their head. And that was probably the biggest turning point.
Hopefully, we can heat up a little fire in Austin Saturday!
There was one game left for the season, Texas. Here the Aggies could prove once and for all they were coming of age. The bonfire before the game was electrifying.
You said, hey, those guys ready to go up there and eat some beef on me. That's exactly what we're going to do.
When they burn the bonfire, people think it's a pep rally or a yell practice or whatever on the outside, but that's not true. It's not a celebration of stacking wood together and having a fire or getting ready to play Texas. It's the melting of the wax that means that now you're bound to Texas A&M. Your responsibility is now forever.
Snap is down, the kick is up, and it's blocked, and it's going to be blocked into Scott Polk's arms, and Polk is on the way, 50, 45, 40, there's only one man that can catch him, he's at the 20, the 15, and down at the 6-yard line.
On a mild December evening before a national television audience, the Texas A&M football program put it all together, winning 37-12.
Cotton down. Who you gonna call? Hornbusters! Hunger's up and the stakes are down. Who you gonna call? Hornbusters! I ain't afraid of no cow.
Coach Shell, he started out at the top, and I think he stayed there ever since he's been there. So he takes it pretty serious. His players take it serious, and I think that's the reason why they've changed the program so quickly.
He wants everything to be the best, and that certainly helps.
he's never gonna take anything secondly. I don't think he's always gonna want the best of everything. You know, whether it be ball games, championships, bowls, clothes, or whatever it is, equipment. I think he's always gonna want the best, and that's good both for the school and the players.
The 1985 team did know how to win. They returned 42 of the 75 lettermen from '84, including up to as many as 7 players who started at one time or another on offense. Murray was back to lead the team at quarterback. 230-pound fullback Anthony Toney and Roger Vick, the 2 leading rushers from a year ago, returned for another season. Flanker Jeff Nelson would be the lead receiver, and the defense, from linebackers Johnny Holland and Todd Howard to safety Domingo Bryant, looked dead solid perfect. The Aggies didn't start well, losing to Alabama. But then came a string of victories that took them to Baylor. In an emotional game before a capacity crowd in Waco, the Aggies were unable to come up with the final points. Kip Corrington ran an interception back 40 yards for a touchdown, and Eric Franklin kicked 3 field goals, but Baylor prevailed 20-15. But this was a different kind of A&M team. They didn't give up. With 1:48 remaining against SMU, Eric Franklin calmly kicked a 48-yard field goal to give the Aggies a crucial 19-17 win over SMU. Anthony Toney and Keith Woodside both ran for over 100 yards that night, proving again that the Aggies had the ground attack to go with Kevin Murray's arm. With only 2 losses, A&M hosts the Texas Longhorns before a record crowd of 77,600 at Kyle Field, and people realized then just how good this team was. Kevin Murray, with his pinpoint passing, threw for 3 touchdowns. The Aggies 42-10, and for the first time in 18 years, A&M was going to the Cotton Bowl. The opponent for the 1986 Cotton Bowl was Auburn, with Heisman Trophy winning halfback Bo Jackson. He quickly put Auburn up 7-0 with a 5-yard touchdown run. But anybody in the stadium could have told you something was with A&M that day. All the hours of practice, all the years of discipline, all the painstaking rehearsal, all had their focus here.
Down and goal, 2.5, full house backfield. Agee went in motion. He may have broken toward the line of scrimmage. Here's the handoff to Jackson. He did not make it. He is stopped at the line of scrimmage at the 2.
Following a pair of runs by Roger Vick, Harry Johnson scampered 11 yards for a touchdown. On the Aggies' next possession, Murray hit tight end Rod Bernstein for 23 yards. The Aggies were driving, and they wouldn't stop the rest of the day. Kevin Murray was just outstanding, and the game was never out of control. This was the kind of heart-stopping football that stirred the emotions of everyone associated with Texas A&M.
If we had had an opportunity to have 50,000 more tickets, we would have sold every one of those. I mean, it was just that exciting feeling. But during the game and after the game, the greatest accomplishment or feeling that I had was being able to look into people's eyes and see their feelings, their response, their deep joy and gratification that A&M was at the Cotton Bowl, A&M won the Cotton Bowl, and their sincere feeling of it. Yeah, it's not like, we're here one day and we're off the bandwagon and we're going the next.
The momentum of the Cotton Bowl sent A&M and Jackie Sherrill charging into the 1986 season. Kevin Murray was back with his rifle arm. But in the season opener, A&M suffered an upset to LSU, 35-17. But the offense turned it on against North Texas. Behind the running of Keith Woodside, A&M won, 48-7. In Game 3, the defense was great, sacking the Southern Miss quarterback 7 times and allowing only 1 yard in the first half. In the win against Texas Tech, Kip Corrington made this magnificent interception. And this interception by James Flowers keyed the 19-7 win against Houston in the 5th game of the season. But the Aggie offense put on a show against Baylor in the big conference matchup. Down 17-0 in the first quarter, this Kevin Murray pass to Tony Thompson with 3:48 left in the game gave the Aggies a heart-stopping 31-30 win. Murray was on a roll with this pass and a 45-10 win over Rice. He broke the conference mark for most career touchdown passes with 41. Murray rallied the Aggies back from an 11-point deficit in another close one against SMU. First with this touchdown pass to Woodside. SMU regained the lead, but with less than 2 minutes remaining, Murray found Woodside again for a 34-yard toss to win the game, 39-35. The Aggies marched into Arkansas in mid-November with only one loss. Once again, they had to resort to another spectacular comeback. But down 4 points with 38 seconds to play, Murray's pass in the end zone fell away. It put A&M's Cotton Bowl hopes on hold. They had 2 big games left, TCU and Texas. Behind Roger Vick's 4 touchdowns, the Aggies beat TCU 74-10, and it was on to Texas. The bonfire burned bright for the Aggies. A victory here would send them to their 2nd consecutive Cotton Bowl. Kevin Murray's pass to Rod Harris was the only A&M touchdown in the game. But along with Scott Slater's field goals, it was enough for a 16-3 victory. This gain by Roger Vick made him the Aggies' first Southwest Conference rushing champion since Glenn Littman did it in 1951. For the first time since 1941, the Aggies and Jackie Sherrill were going to 2 straight Cotton Bowls. A&M football has taught its legions of fans unforgettable lessons about courage and dedication, about solidarity in the heat of battle, valor in the face of improbable odds, dignity in the midst of defeat, and grace at the coming of victory.
The people are recognizing A&M just like the people that we play, and the players saying, wow, you know, A&M is the place to play, and that's what college football is all about.
It's just something about this place that once you've been here and you leave, you like take a part of it with you. And you always want to come back. It's just something about it.
Over the years, from the days when they played in striped shirts to the modern-day glories of the Cotton Bowl, A&M football shows us the test of the human spirit. The young men of A&M football play only a few seasons, and then they pass the mantle to someone else. But the memory of their play remains etched in our minds for a long, long time.
If I had it to do over, I'd go back. I'll war him when they crank up the band or something. If you haven't got a chill in your body, you better get up and go home, because you're not an Aggie.
Being an Aggie is not really a state of being where you're on campus going to A&M or whatever. It's more a state of mind. If you can look at what A&M says about fellowship and fraternity and camaraderie and 12th man, and if that suits you, if that is something you identify with and believe, then you're an Aggie. That's what being an Aggie is.